Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special edition of Africa Today, where we tackle the first Russian-African Summit and Economic Forum that kicked off today, headed by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Sochi city. And on this issue, we're glad to be joined over the phone by Dr. Sherif Amir, political analyst and professor of international relations. Good afternoon, Dr. Sherif.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Sherif, how do you see the significance of the first Russian-African Summit and Economic Forum that kicked off today and presided by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Well, this summit comes in a very important time in the Middle East now and in Africa concerning the changes of power. We have seen that lately in Africa especially, there is a decline of the European forces presence in Africa. And now there is Chinese and Russian presence in the economic and security level. Let's say, for example, in Central Africa, there is a civil war there, and there is a heavy presence of French troops. But Russia went in there and made the mediation and made the effort of keeping peace. It's a fragile peace, but it has its presence there. And it was a shock for the European community and shock for France also. So I think that the relations now between Africa and Russia, it's about security, it's about economy. And when it comes to Egypt, the head of the African Union, we know that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, before this kind of relationship between Egypt and Africa, meaning the African Union, Egypt started strong relations with Russia. And the bond between both leaders, President Vladimir Putin and President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, is very strong, because we all know that in 2013, before President Sisi was democratically elected, President Putin offered the support for the Egyptian people for the revolution in the 30th of June revolution. And President Sisi went there at Sochi and met when he was Minister of Defense, and he met with President Putin. So I think that the bond between both men is strong. They understand the challenges. They know that there is a decline of the traditional superpowers, decline for the United States, decline for Europe. We all know that Russia also is aiming to invest a lot in Egypt, new mega projects, whether in the Suez Canal sector, the new cities in Al Alamein, and of course the El Daba nuclear central there. So
right.
we all know that the relations are very strong. Okay.
Right. Dr. Sherif, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said that Russia-Africa Summit enhances means of cooperation with the African continent and pushes development process 2063. What do you think are the main challenges facing the development process in the African continent?
The main challenges are, of course, economy and security. We know that many of the African countries now are aiming to make development in their own countries. And this is what President Sisi urged the African leaders and African youth and the numerous African and youth conferences to do, to build their own countries. In order to do that, we have to work with countries who are willing to come to Africa to help, not to just use Africa's mines of gold or oil or anything else and then go back to their country. They have to work with the African nations on African soil. So this is what happened with the Chinese and what happened with the Russians. And I think that this is the economic level. On the security level, we know that we are partners with Russia in fighting terrorism in Syria and fighting terrorism in Libya. And I think that Russia is concerned also with what's taking place in the Mediterranean. Libya is a big African country, and the game is open there for all the superpowers to spoil, to get the oil, to get the business of illegal immigration. So I think that Russia is very interested in combating all these security problems along with Egypt. And we have known also that Russia was playing a role in the mediation between the forces in Sudan after the uprising that took place, and there was this new process, political process there. So Africa is in the heart of the priorities of Russia. It's not new. It's a continuous plan from the Soviet Union era. But I think that President Vladimir Putin knows now that France and England and the United States are not the same powers as they were before in Africa. So it's an opportunity for Russia to be there. It's an opportunity that there is a leader, a sovereign leader like President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who has excellent relations with Moscow and Washington, but the center of his priorities is the sovereignty and the independence of decision of Egypt. So I think that President Putin understands that, and this is the geopolitical and geostrategic planning of Russia. It's called the Eurasia Plan. It means that there is superpowers or regional powers in every part of the world who are working in alliance with Russia. It's not like the American imaginary, meaning that there is only one superpower and the other countries are satellites. So I think President Putin knows that Egypt is a regional power, and this is in the interest of Russia. And there is a regional leader in this place. It's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. So I think that the cooperation between the two men who come, both of them have the background of security and intelligence services, and both men took charge of their countries when they were devastated by revolutions and civil chaotic scenes. I think that both men knows the challenges. They know that they have to work together, and they know that security and economy are both major challenges for both countries.
Right. Well, President Sisi, in his speech at the summit, Sochi summit, stressed Africa's keenness in integration, highlighting the significance of investment in human resources, and especially that youth represents 65% in Africa. So how do you see the significance of investing in African youth?
The significance is it's very clear now, because we know that Africa detains a lot of the sources of energy, and I think the solar energy is something very important that Africa has now. So I think that kind of production will help really the connection between both between Africa and Africa. There's another point. The youth, as you said, 65%. The youth and had the dream to go to Europe. We all know that we have seen the unfortunate scenes in the Mediterranean, the boats capsizing and people losing their lives before reaching the shores of Italy and Africa and the European Union. And I think now that Russia understands that working with these youth, inviting them to Russia to work there, to study there, this is, as I said, a traditional role of Russia. It was since the Soviet Union, and now it's the same thing. So I think it's time that the African youth will look at Russia as a new superpower, but a superpower not to immigrate to, but a superpower to work with on their own countries. And I think that President Sisi was very clear about this point from the beginning, that no one will build your countries, but you will build your countries. But there is something very important that you have to notice, that you have partners who are eager to work with you in your own country. And when I say that, President Sisi said that also. He said he meant by that Russia and China. So I think that we are having a new phase. It's fortunate for Africa that President Sisi is the head of the African Union. He bears all the challenges now, and he's offering all this to the African youth who are eager to work on their country.
Well, Dr. Sherif Amir, Professor of International Relations, many thanks for your insights, sir. Short break, and we'll be right back.